Hello, everybody. Thank you for sticking around after Table Takes. Hope you enjoyed that show. We're back for another Gen Con Roundtable, and we are rejoined this week, by Hawke Robinson from RPG Research and RPG Therapeutics, the founder, president, and recreational therapist. He's got a background in research psychology, computer science, neuroscience. There's a long list of things here, Hawke, that you are apparently great at. Let's just boil it down to you do a whole bunch of things, and you have been very nice to kind of be on our show multiple times to cover multiple topics. So thank you again for coming back out.
Thank you.
We also have Adam Davis from Game to Grow, who has a master's of education with a focus on drama therapy. He's one of the founders and executive director of Game to Grow, a nonprofit based out of Seattle that uses D&D, uses games, most notably D&D, in therapeutic social skill groups for kids and teens. We also have Adam Johns, who is the other founder and executive director, and is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Game to Grow serves around 80 youth per week in game-based groups, which have been transitioned to online games during our current situation. I think we were just talking about how you want a game night, but not a work game night, as it were. And finally, Dr. Rachel Kowert from Take This is a research psychologist and the research director of Take This, the first mental health nonprofit formed to work specifically in the gaming industry and gaming communities. You Take This has, I think, really become a staple of a lot of conventions, running a lot of like quiet rooms and stuff like that. So it's great to also have you here on that. You've been studying games and gamers for about 10 years now. Is that right?
That's correct.
Are we always surprising you with something new, or do you have us all figured out by now?
Always surprised. But, there is a community is consistent. And I think we're going to talk about that today.
Well, I mean, you need people to play games with, most games with. So that tends to be a pretty common element. So we had an episode before that we can put a link in chat if I can dig it up in a little bit. But we had an episode before where we talked about general social distancing and well-being, basically. And we had more material than we could fit into an hour. So we figured it'd be nice to have all of you back again, maybe a little bit pick up where we left off. But I also think that enough time has passed since then that a lot of things, a lot of emotions, a lot of mental states have changed. So I figure it's also worth revisiting and kind of summarizing a lot of our what we covered last time. Which to kind of go through that, we talked about the repercussions of social isolation, and I think that Hawke and Rachel in particular had a lot to say about that. Do either of you kind of want to pick that up and summarize the high points of what happens when people are isolated?
All the bad things. Social isolation and loneliness are associated with negative psychological and physical repercussions, increased stress, increased sense of depression, increased anxiety, poor decision making. We can get into other of the physical cardiovascular disease. You're at a higher risk. So we want to try, even though we're social distancing, to not be socially isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the key thing is, though, it's also the difference between alone and lonely, and that has a significant neurological and physiological impact when somebody's experiencing loneliness for a prolonged period. So helping people through a paradigm of, well, just because you're not able to be touchy-feely with all these people, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go into a deeper funk and such. It's not easy to stop it, but working on adaptive behaviors and thoughts and such that can help get through changing situations to be able to adjust to these as much as possible. So resilience, helping people develop as much resilience as possible. The moods have changed. I was talking before we got on the air about, it was much more about the worry, the anxiety, and the depression. Now I'm starting to see, as I'm getting calls for halfway houses and such, a little bit more of the conflict and the anger and the cabin fever stuff, kind of the pressure is building. It all comes from the same place. but we're kind of going through a second phase here of this prolonged social isolation.
I feel like we're kind of out of the clear and present danger phase, where everyone's immediate thought is like, we need to be safe, we need to take care of ourselves, and I feel like we've kind of now moved into a space where it's a little bit more about like, I don't know when things are going to go back to normal, or I don't know how anything is going to be the same again, or even just like, I don't know how I can spend more time with these people that I'm trapped in this house with.
And that's something we've actually been able to help. So for example, being trapped in the house at these halfway houses. So some of these are for drug rehab, some of these are for juveniles, some of these are for prisons, right? They're going from parole, halfway house process. And you're put together with roommates that are, you didn't get to pick. And a lot of resources are shared and you're on top of each other. And normally the key thing is to get work and get out of there. And that's a real problem right now. So one of the things that's been nice is I've been able to start using the RPG bus and trailers again, because I'm able to pull up, and this is less about the accessibility. It's just about get them out of the house and in a quiet, private place to talk, away from all the chaos and stress. It's just out on the sidewalk there on the bus, but it gives them a little bit of a bubble away from that stress. And that's been really helpful. And we keep discovering new things all the time. Like when we did the MDA camp, we didn't realize they would use tabletop games to recharge themselves before they went back into the LARP, and keep doing that a 3-hour session. Never thought of that. It just worked out. Same thing with this. We put the trailers for accessibility issues we were having and things, but now this whole other situation is revealed. Oh, portable quiet rooms to get away from being trapped with your family and non-family, and just a different physical space gives a feeling of relief. Literally people sit down and go, oh, as they sink into our sofa and stuff that we have in the trailers. And the Adams have been, you remember the first trailer, it's got those nice comfy
sofas. Yeah, it's awesome. It's really, really cool. And having, I can imagine just having a separate space, not only a separated space from those that you may be spending a lot of time with, but also a little bit of a new space of being able to be in something that feels a little different than your bedroom or your living room or your bathroom, the places that you've been trying to escape into in your small household area. So I can imagine that makes a huge difference to be able to have that space.
Yeah, our brains crave novelty, right? We've got these big frontal cortexes, for social rules. So our brains aren't getting exercise if we're not doing a lot of social stuff. And so that's kind of like sitting around on the couch and going, couch potato, and we're not getting to socially engage. And we crave novelty, and those of us who are ADHD really crave it, even more so. But it's a human experience to some degree for that novelty. And when, we want routine, and we want a little bit of novelty where we feel safe. And so, yeah, it's been really interesting, this whole other facet of these mobile facilities we never thought of before. And I'm glad
Adam Davis, did you have a perspective you kind of want to jump in on?
I was going to say that just showed up in my Facebook memories recently, Hawke, when you were doing your nationwide tours with your
every year.
And I remember the first time I saw it, and seeing how much you have done with it since then has been tremendous. That the time that we saw it, you drove, obviously we met in like a parking lot somewhere in West Seattle.
Yeah, West Seattle, yeah.
To get our tour of that bus. It was pretty fantastic.
Yeah. One thing now, the bus and 2 trailers. So we got 3 mobile rooms, and if Gen Con still happens, we're hoping to be bringing that over there and everything awesome. To show folks. So
one thing I was going to build on what we were talking about just a moment ago was this idea of what, sort of to build on what Hawke was saying earlier around first phase was to react to the growing stress of will I get sick, and now this idea of not just going back to normal, but what will normal be like now. One thing I mentioned last time we chatted was about grief, that we might be feeling grief, and the process of going back to life is going to be very different. And we have to sort of say goodbye to, at least temporarily, to what going to a restaurant might have looked like, going to a movie, going to the theater. My background is in theater, and I worked at theaters for many years. Adam's wife works in the theater world as well. And that that culture will change dramatically. One of my favorite things to do is travel, and that will dramatically change, other than my road trips, which I love to do and always have. But airplane trips to conferences and things like that will always be, my expectation is it'll always be somewhat different, either in the way that everyone is now at a higher level of alert, but also just in the nature of when will conferences come back where we can play tables of games with strangers and not have to have hand sanitizer everywhere. It's going to be a different world.
And it's not like flying through the air was too unstressful already or anything. It was too pleasant, too calm.
I was a mask wearer before it was,
Before it was
necessary
cool.
and advised
Yeah, I thought he was
by
gonna say
the
that.
Center for Disease Control.
Adam's the ultimate mask hipster. It definitely, I think a lot of the space that people are in right now is in how do I navigate this being a part of my routine. What does that look like? And I think a fair number of people, and myself maybe included, have been holding our breath, saying like, I just need to make it through another week. I just need to make it through another month, and then things are going to get better. And things will get better, but there's also a high need now to get to a place where you're finding ways to fill in the needs that you have and the places where you have those needs. As Adam was mentioning earlier, a need to have a game night where I'm just hanging out with my friends. And previously that was maybe easier to accomplish and easier to do. And now you're having to step a little bit out of your comfort zone to set something like that up by either the selection of the games that you can actually play within that setting, or in the dedication of the time that everybody's going to make in setting up their camera and setting up their computer to be able to play those games together. And I think those steps are going to be that much more important now when we are really unsure about what the future is going to hold and how much longer this is really going to go on. That effort's going to be really important.
We all have to become experts in troubleshooting our microphones or our cameras, or having backups that we can just default back to and be like, okay, that's fine. I have the shiny new microphone, but it's not working right now. I'm just going to go to this other one and we will be perfectly fine.
And a lot of us are newly lonely in the midst of COVID, in the midst of lockdown, right? We had more of a thriving social life, and now we're newly adapting to what it's like to experience loneliness. But there is loneliness has been a chronic sort of pandemic for a long time. So there are a lot of us who have been experiencing loneliness in a way that is already affecting our physiological health, our neurological health, and so on. And now it's gotten so much worse in the midst of the lockdown. A lot of the participants in the Game to Grow groups that we work with were already very chronically isolated and chronically lonely. And now they are under lockdown. We've had a couple of jokes about being stuck at home with some families. But I have groups that we end on a spotlight where you shine a spotlight to other people. And some of them are saying, thank you so much for letting me play with people and enjoy social contact, because I have sisters that are killing me. And just that little bit of regular social contact right now is so important in the midst of this. For some of us more than others.
That's something that we touched on a little bit last time, I think, about because we talked about the repercussions of not having social contact and the importance of it. But then we also did talk a little bit about like what kind of social contact is best. And I remember the joke of, I was like, oh, you're just waving at your mailman's not enough, and you were like, no, like even that, like that is recognition of someone else's humanity and their recognition of yours, and that's really important. So does anybody kind of want to reiterate or revisit any of those points just to really drive some of that home to folks? Like, what kind of contact is enough? Is there some that's better than others?
Well, I would say about the mailman, a funny thing happened to me the other day. The Amazon delivery man came and he dropped something off. And I opened the door because he was walking away, but I didn't realize he had another package. So we were like, I don't know, 4 feet from each other. And we were like, oh, okay. Okay, just step back. Like, like I don't know where I'm supposed to be in relation to strangers anymore. And I think for me, maintaining social contact is being further from the Amazon delivery man, but also maintaining Zoom play time, right? So I play Dungeons and Dragons with Adam here and some other colleagues of mine. And we have been far more consistent in playing D&D over the quarantine period than I say we were a couple months before. And I think it's just we all realize that this playfulness, this frivolity, this moment of stepping away from this everyday stress and constant news cycle and living with our families and never leaving. I love my family, but come on, we need to interact with other people. Has been so important, and I think it's important for a lot of us, whether it's a D&D group or tabletop simulator or playing cards on Zoom with your neighbor. Having that moment of just something fun for the sake of being fun has been really important for me anyway.
Yeah, and it's so important to note the difference between passive leisure time and active leisure time. And active doesn't necessarily have to be physical, but it's the engaging in doing something versus just passively taking in. It used to be just vegging in front of the television. Now it's, streaming or, memes or whatever, but just kind of passively taking that all in. Research has shown for decades that approach of consuming media and such is really unhealthful. It actually increases your cortisol and stress levels. You don't recharge, right? You come home from a long, stressful day in the past, before this, but you come home, stressful day, you veg in front of the television, and you don't get a good recovery. Versus turn the TV off, read a book, or play chess game with a friend, or go for a walk, or whatever. Those kinds of more active, engaging activities are much more recuperative, both physically and neurologically, and emotionally and socially. And so it's very important that, I'm running a lot of people, even before all this started, we, the Adams do as well, a lot of high risk and at risk populations that they don't have, I'm a recreational therapist, so, I've got my bias here, but most of them have very few recreational activities, right? There'll be this passive intake of media, substance dependency, whether it's excessive caffeine energy drinks or pot or something more hardcore, but it's more than just medicinal. It's controlling their life and their identity, or part affiliation with gang or other groups that are unhealthful and maladaptive, and then that just gets exacerbated in these situations, and they're not allowed to go around. They can't get out there, and they didn't have other activities. And so really trying to find these engaging activities is so important for your health. But one really big problem with these high-risk populations is a lot of them there's millions of people to this day who do not have internet, do not have smartphones, do not have their own computers or tablets. And we work with thousands per year who are in that situation. They rely on the schools, libraries, and community centers. They're all shut down. So if you happen to be somewhere that you can get access right now and you're seeing the stream, you do have resources. Even in small towns, most of the schools have the ability for you to check out. They're being really flexible to check out laptops, to check out different devices to help you make that connection. So I know a lot of people have been saying, oh my goodness, hardware's gotten so expensive because the supply chain's broken and demand and all this. But for those who really didn't have money to begin with, that's not even an option anyway. But the good news is a lot of these schools and stuff, they've got a surplus right now, some of them, of these devices that they just need people to reach out, because most people don't know. So if you know somebody who's in a situation like that, whether they're elderly, young, anything in between, whatever the reason, and they don't have a good means of connecting, you can get a hold of the schools, even though you can't go to classes. In many of these cases, the administrative staff can be contacted, and if you're in their district and such, you can get these resources pretty quickly. They've really expedited the process. And some of the community centers like Spark Central over here and some of the sister organizations in Seattle also are trying to help get that word out so that people can get these connections and do these interactive activities. And that includes like smartphones and tablets and stuff. And providers are giving away free internet for some of these people too. So a lot of people don't know about those resources.
I mean, kind of as Hawke is saying, like the idea, the thing that we're really trying to aim towards is more efficient recharging time and more efficient effective socialization time. And so because it was so much easier to acquire before, we spent so much time, talking to somebody in passing while I was going to work or at the coffee shop or things along those lines that we don't have anymore. Now you have to be much more intentional and much more thoughtful about what kind of time are you actually spending with your socialization or with your free time that you have it, and how can I be more thoughtful and engaged. And I think we talked about this a little bit in the previous talk, but how can I be really reflective of the practice that I'm doing, and how it is affecting me personally. I think one of the things that's really coming up for a lot of people now is that people are struggling and were struggling, and now it's really spilling out into a lot of other parts of your life as it starts to get more out of control for you. And so being able to really reflect, really think about when I do socialization with other people, whether it's over Zoom, even over a phone call, even over texting, thinking about how you felt beforehand and thinking about how you feel afterwards, and really having that almost intake outtake survey of your own feelings for those experiences is going to give you a lot to go on. Be reflective in that practice and use that to guide the experiences that you are trying to set up for yourself in the future. If I know that I had a great time hanging out with talking to my friend on the phone while both of us watch the same Netflix show, like, man, I got to set that up again. I got to make sure that we schedule another time to make something like that happen. And it might seem silly, it might seem like a small thing, but those small things are what is really going to help hold you together, and get you through the difficult time that this is going to be, maybe for a long time.
Yeah, we talked about that, I think, anecdotally, a couple of times. Like I was talking about how I did that with my wife when she was in Ireland. There are a lot of times that we just were on video chat doing whatever it is we were doing, and every now and then we would talk to each other, and that at least gave us a feeling of being in the same space. And I've definitely found that as time has gone on, it's behooved me to more consciously reach out to people, and I've sent a few more texts of like, hey, what's up, how's it going, or I found a thing and I thought of you. It's like sometimes that's just sending them something on Twitter, sometimes it's texting them, sometimes it's calling. But I've had more friends respond back with like, I'm super glad you reached out. I've been so lonely, people haven't reached out or whatever. So anything you can do to consciously reach out to people that you haven't seen in a long time. And it could be, you're going to be ambitious and you're going to set up a game night. It could also just be, let's just hang out. And if we game, then fantastic. If not, we at least hung out and talked, which is still incredibly valuable right now.
One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about this in my own struggles with loneliness as an introvert who likes people, is really also thinking about the way that this impacts the clients that we have. And I literally, when you were, Rachel, talking about the FedEx man, the UPS man came to drop off a package at my house, and I opened the door as he was going back to his truck to yell thank you at him because of our conversation the last time we did this. I was like, I'm not just going to nod at him, I'm going to yell at him so he will know that his presence matters to me. And that's really what it comes down to. There's really three different layers to it. One is just being noticed and realizing, have someone else seeing that you're there. The second layer to that is to have your uniqueness recognized. And then the third layer to that is knowing that your presence actually matters and your contributions are valid and valuable. And I think that's really what we're aspiring to, and we have always aspired to, is to recognize the sort of genuine nature of someone else's valuable humanity. But even in the midst of lockdown, we're all farther behind than that a lot of us are just looking out the window hoping to be seen by someone else, and getting to that stage where we can feel like our presence actually matters and that someone actually cares about us is really what we want to do, which is, obviously so many of us love Dungeons and Dragons because it's so easy to do that and feel like you can have an impact on a group of people. We can create something together. So now we have a shared sense of memory around this game that we played. I played in a game, I think it was yesterday, that Adam Johns ran, and like I keep thinking about it and I keep wanting to message Adam about it, or and it's one of these things which, now that we have this sort of shared language and shared culture, I can be like, inside joke, toss it out, and all I need is like a thumbs up emoji to know that we have this recognition point that we've seen. You know, I've been playing D&D with Rachel for, I don't know, over a year now, 2 years. I've lost track. All time blends together now.
Yes.
But you know, we have a sense of history, and that knowing that I can contribute something that someone else can see and appreciate really is what gives us a sense of meaning and purpose. And I think that I advocate that anyone who's feeling particularly lonely reaches out to Hawke, because I know that they have amazing resources right now for people not doing therapeutic work, but who are just doing, come play with us, be in community. And I think it's really important that we do as much as we can to get to that third layer of social recognition.
As well as Hawke, I think you have a whole lot of resources just around helping people to interact online for RPG stuff too.
Yeah, I've been involved with gaming since role-playing gaming since 1977, and actually online since 1979 when it was ARPANET, DARPANET, before it was the internet, and then before the web. So, by the way, I'm going to be a grandfather in a few weeks, so yes, I'm that old now.
Congratulations, Hawke. That's amazing.
You have been online as long as I have been alive.
Yeah. I'm like, oh boy, am I dating myself now? But so I was talking to Germans on the BBS back in '79 that later on turned out to be hackers that took out the University of Berkeley stuff. Like, oh my goodness. But yeah, so I've been in tech forever. And worked for companies that were all about virtual experiences and virtual document management. And I still have a company called DevDev Portal that was all about VOW, virtual office and workplace. And what we noticed that most companies, this is back in the 90s, were doing wrong with the virtual office that really came to a head around 2008 to 2010. In the middle of that financial crisis, the CEOs of HP and Yahoo and others suddenly started to dismantle their virtual office programs. After we were making huge inroads in the 90s and early 2000s, it saved companies money, it improved quality of life, it expanded your talent pool to be global instead of just local. You know, you didn't have to spend 4 hours a day in commute time. You know, there are just so many advantages. And, you know, this was our sales pitches because that was our business model. And it wasn't for everybody, but it was for the vast majority of knowledge workers, certainly. And all of a sudden they started dismantling them about 10 years ago by the millions of people who were allowed to work remotely had those taken away over the last 10 years. And then we run into this, and now people are going, hey, wait a minute, the city is, the skies are clear and all these other things are happening. Like, people, but going back, one of the number one complaints was, especially for like salespeople and such, is missing that touchy-feely and water cooler talk. With conventions, it's the hallway chat. Hey, you, hey, how you doing? Haven't seen you since blah, blah, blah. Just those unexpected social things that happen. And most virtual office stuff, all they do is set up work. Our stuff, we set up, you have a water cooler chat room, either with audio, video, or just text, where you have an area where you're allowed to post, hey, here's my latest meme thing or whatever, you know, just to get that human, not just work robot. You know, Russian for work is, you know, robotnik, workers, robotnik, robot. And to not just be a worker robot, to be a human being and engage with other human beings. And a lot of the online programs kind of miss all of that less targeted social interaction. So they will set up for an event, hey, we've got this panel broadcast, we've got this presentation, but there isn't a whole lot of the encouraging free. One thing we noticed, we just did a test a few weeks ago with ZoeCon, testing this new platform and such. And one of the things that was interesting to watch is people set up a food and beverage room and bars in the chat room, in Discord and such. And they're sitting there talking about what they're eating. And because, I mean, if you look at all the food shows, the world travel food shows, how do cultures express and connect socially? It's often over dinner and right, over food and drink. We connect amazingly as humans. We're missing an awful lot of that in this virtual environment. But you're seeing people are starting to do that. You know, this NBC article with the ants and everything, they talk about being an ant and going, num, 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 I eat that watermelon, things like that. And so even in that game, this food thing comes up. So trying to think of, so we did a little brainstorm the other week. I've got this big brainstorm page of when you go to a physical convention or any social event like that, a party, a dance, whatever, trying to parse through what are all those social interactions that you're getting that people are missing when you do it virtually. Because we've got virtual dances. Second Life has been doing virtual parties for over a decade.
I think a lot of people are DJing on Instagram now.
Yeah, I've been a DJ for 20 years. I've done radio and internet and all that. But there is something missing versus being a physical party. So we're going through those pieces. And then what we have to do is start finding, I've been trying to tell my clients, look at this as a 3-year transition, right? When Spanish flu happened, it was a 3-year thing. This is going to be a 3-year transition thing. It is not going to, whatever the new change is, it's going to take about 3 years to work through what that is. And while I don't want people to dwell on that, because that's just 3 years.
Yeah, I'm looking at Adam's face while he's saying 3-year transition.
What that does do is that, because otherwise what's happening, I'm running into clients who are like, it's never going to end, right? It's what's happening now. It will be this way forever. We know the only constant is change. So we know this too will change. We don't know what it will be exactly, but we know it will change. And it will kind of restabilize and such, and we'll get back to whatever until the next thing. And looking at it as, it's going to take about 3 years to kind of let the dust clear and resettle and all of that. Let's plan that way. Let's not, we can't control what will happen, but let's at least, if we know that, it's a little less scary than this is going to go on forever. It's the end of the world and it will never get better. Versus, okay, 3 years is a long time. How can I plan and get ready for that? First, focus on today, right now, and then let's have some longitudinal planning. And you were talking earlier about the purpose and direction, right? That's the number one predictor for resilience and adjustment, is the more clear your purpose and direction is, the more resilient you're going to be in times of crisis. When you hit plateaus or really difficult times or even setbacks and failures, you will bounce back much better when you have a clear guiding star to get you through all that.
As well as a set of social support, a set of routines, and a set of as Adam and I like to call it, rituals, to help you get through some of those things. The places where you really can grab onto something, you really can control something, and that might be, a Saturday game night. That might be your ritual of you take a shower every morning. Those things are going to be playing a large role in helping you to make it through this on a large scale. You have to sort of change what your baseline is and change your accessibility to the rituals and routines that you need in order to be able to really make it through in something like this. Adam likes to say it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that is very much true in this case.
And
so one thing I want to touch on, because before we kind of maybe go into the future or go into details, we were talking about kind of the importance or how helpful it is to reach out to people and to actively connect with them. And I just wanted to take a moment just to talk about how that works from the other side, because I do know that some people that I've reached out to have been sad that they haven't had more people reach out to them. And I just kind of want to maybe talk about I hesitate to call it a trap, but just the feeling that you can get into that, not enough people are reaching out to you. People aren't as interested in you. And I feel that, like, whenever I talk to people like that, I just try to remind them that, you're going through a lot. The people around you that care about you are also going through a lot. They probably have plenty of their own concerns that they just have not had a chance to call and share with you. But do any of you kind of have advice on how people can process that kind of feeling they get when they don't feel like the right number of people are reaching out, if that makes sense?
Well, it's the danger of social media, big time.
Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah, but that's the people see that and try doing those comparisons, and that is that trap you were mentioning.
I think it's important to keep in mind we're all going through something together. As a big society, there's a challenge that we're all facing together, but we're not necessarily all experiencing it the same way. And so it's worthwhile to keep in mind, Rachel and Hawke both talked about all of these challenges that come along with loneliness, with isolation, but you don't necessarily have all of those. And it isn't necessarily the case that everybody is experiencing depression the same way, and everybody is experiencing maybe boredom, or maybe a need to get out of the house from their family members. Everybody has still their own set of unique challenges that may change the way that they're able to reach out. Not to mention their own interpersonal challenges that may change their needs for reaching out. It's worthwhile to keep in mind that even though you may be saying people are not reaching out to me enough, they're not wanting to spend time with me, it really may not be the same set of challenges, and some people may need that reminder, may need that moment for you to reach out to them, to say, hey, I if you have any time, I would love to get together, because it may not be crossing their minds, or it may not be in their path. It may not be the first thing that they reach to when they need new things. And it's both okay to ask for help from your friends, from your family. It's okay to reach out and say, I need this. I need somebody to spend time with. That is perfectly acceptable. And I think a lot of people are also in the place where they're ready to help other people when you ask for it, because there's a need that also becomes fulfilled in being able to offer help, where a lot of people are in the position where they don't know what help they can do in a time like this. Maybe I have reserves, or maybe I have an opportunity to feel like I can help my friend, and I have no idea how to do that. So really being able to be willing to reach out to people to ask for what you need is a really important thing in a time period like this.
I'm also a big fan of the concept of opposite action. And sometimes when I'm feeling angry because a friend hasn't reached out to me, and my what I want to do is be really passive aggressive and not reach out to them, but really that's not going to get me what I actually need, right? What I actually want. Me pushing somebody away who hasn't reached out to me hurts everyone in that situation. So what I need to do is recognize, sort of a mindfulness activity of recognizing my impulse is to push someone away, and then do the opposite action to that and actually reach out. And what Hawke was saying earlier around, it doesn't have to necessarily be a big thing. It's just a, hey, I saw this and I thought of you, right? I mentioned some friends that I'm reconnecting with because of COVID, and I just see things on Reddit. I like to be on Reddit, and there's lots of funny videos of kids saying and doing funny things. And my friend is a dad. And so thought of you, funny picture of a kid singing a song with a guitar, those things are really, really valuable, because that's just a little thing, right? It's a little thing. And it's not necessarily saying I need help, but it's just sending something out there, hoping that they'll be like a, once again, smiley face with a, crying eyeball emoji, whatever the case is. That's so funny. I cried. Thank you. But then also, when reaching out to somebody, when we're trying to help, one of the things that I think I got this from you, Rachel, I don't remember, is the idea of a friend menu. When you're offering somebody help, to say, do you need anything, is sometimes too much for them to go, there's a universe of expectations. I don't know what I could possibly ask for. But say, hey, would you like to schedule a time to grab a drink? Would you like to, you give them a limited set of options, and then they can say, sure, I'll take number 2.
Right? Well, if we want to keep it with gaming, you'd be like, here are 6 options. Roll a d6 and see if that's the one that you'd like me to do, and we'll get that going.
I think a good point that everyone seems to be making is that it doesn't have to be elaborate to be effective. So even if you're not feeling like, okay, I play a Saturday Gloomhaven game with my brother now, which is very it takes a lot of time, and you have to really set up, and you have to be committed. But if that's not in your schedule, you could watch a stream, for instance, and have that alone together that you were talking about. I know I'm watching way more streams than I ever did. And it's a great way to connect with, if you happen to know the person who's hosting the stream, or the community associated with the stream, or just to have another voice in your house in the background talking about something that you also care about.
Yeah, I had a revelation, I think, struck me the other day when I was listening to a stream, in that when you're playing an RPG, I think this is for RPGs in particular, when you're playing an RPG, I feel like you're kind of doing, like, let's say 3 things at once. One is you're writing a story with your friends at the table. 2 is you're telling your part of that story directly. You're being active, you're being involved. But 3 is you're listening to the other people tell their part of the story. And it, maybe this was obvious to everybody else, but it occurred to me that when you're watching a stream, you're doing that 3rd thing. Like, you don't have your turn, your initiative doesn't come up, you don't get to say what you do, but you're still like kind of doing half of the active things that you're doing at the table. And I think that is one of the reasons why listening to streams does feel appeal a lot, I think, to people who play a lot of RPGs.
I think it still has that opportunity for shared language too, which is very
Mhm.
interesting in the same way that any show does. If I watch, if I watch the Witcher series on Netflix, and I now can have that conversation with a friend of mine who's also watched the series, we've created an opportunity for shared language with each other. And any stream also has that sort of same shared space, right? Rachel, you can sit down with a friend, but from a large distance away
Apart,
from each
yes.
other, right?
Mhm.
And you can both be watching the same stream, and in doing that, you can spark discussion with each other, and you can spark the opportunity to share language between something that's happened. And that could be a funny thing, but it could also be
Mhm.
something that's just an interesting. Oh, that reminds me of a story that I should tell you about, or an experience that I had. And a lot of playing board games is exactly that experience. That it's a space that we can share, that we can use to build shared language, but that we can also use to be able to jump into entirely other topics of conversation, and to be our spark for creating those things.
You were talking earlier about we're in this together. I mean, this is all kind of cohort culture, right? When you watch the same shows or you have the same interests, you watch the same games, whatever, and you can have that water cooler chat, whatever, later with somebody. Oh, did you see this? Did you hear that? Etc. The latest album dropped, etc. Gives you that greater sense of belonging to a greater group than just yourself, and it's that whole cohort effect. I mean, if you look, I've experienced. My kids are now all in their 20s, and I introduced them to a lot of the stuff from my cohort of shows from the 70s and 80s and 90s and such that none of their cohort had ever heard of, but they would catch the references their teachers were making in school, and then the teachers would be stunned that my kids knew the references to these shows and pop culture, what have you. Like, how do you know this? Oh, my dad made me watch all this stuff. And it's that whole cohort culture that we're having right now as this is happening. We're in this together. This is a global cohort experience that is going to have an effect throughout the world, everybody across all the different borders of culture. You're just like, World War I and World War II. The research on the people, you have to take into account that cohort effect of how they're going to look at the world and through what lens, and the references and connections they're going to have with other people and how to look at it. There was somebody was putting something out there about if you were born in 1900 versus 2000, and all the different things that you experienced between 1900 and 1980 versus 2000 to 2020 so far, with World War I and Spanish flu and World War I and the Roaring '20s and the Depression and World War II and Korean War and Vietnam and the Cold War and just all the gas crunch. I remember us sitting in line in California and ran out of gas waiting in line, or the gas stations ran out of gas and out of luck, and just that whole shared experience. And that's something my second wife that we have, my first wife was about 5.5 years younger, and there was actually a little bit of a difference. There was a little bit of a disconnect in those experiences. My second wife is 2 years older than I am, but we have a very close cohort experience. So people think we're reading each other's minds by saying just one word, but it's all that embedded reference. And so we have that now, and it is definitely an opportunity to feel connected with the greater world in a way that hasn't happened since World War II, probably.
So you're saying we're all going to come out of this being really good on codename teams with each other, is what you're telling me.
For a specific set.
So we were touching on this a little bit before about how things have changed in the past month-ish or so. And one of the things that I wanted to discuss was, now that different states and different regions are starting to lift the lockdown, generally in stages, at different rates, at different precaution levels. I wanted to talk like how, now that we have kind of adapted to one circumstance and we're changing that circumstance, and not everybody is convinced about what the best approach is going to take, do you have advice for people on how to navigate through this process, both, for their personal mental health, but also how they can kind of work through that to maintain the kind of social connections that they want?
I think one of the most important things to keep in mind is that it's going to be a slow process, and it's
Mhm.
going to be kind of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back process as well. I'm not a disease scientist, but I have a lot of expectation that we're going to open some things up and then maybe see that that didn't go so well and close some things up again, and it's going to be that back and forth. So I'm holding myself ready for that kind of process. And what that means for me is I'm not going to abandon the routines, the rituals that I'm setting up to help take care of myself, with the expectation that, oh great, things are open, I'm going to jump right back into how they used to be, because I might be setting myself up for failure as things start to close back up again, and I have to reestablish a lot of those routines. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce new things on a very sort of case by case individual basis, without
Mhm.
abandoning the things that I'm using to hold myself steady. So my routines that I've been going for walks in the morning with my wife in order to just have a little bit of time outside, and they're by ourselves and away from everybody else, but they really help me a lot to feel like I'm getting out of the house, and that routine's become very important to me. And if as things start to open up a little bit more, and I might be able to finally have a dinner with some friends at one of our house, that would be amazing. But I'm also not going to give up those walks in the morning, with the expectation that I'm jumping right back into how things can be. I'm going to keep in mind that at any moment I might need to go. Nope, we're back to in-home isolation, and I'm going to really need those walks again. Just as much as I did before. So I really encourage people to think about what routines are very important to them, and make sure that you're not losing those as you're introducing other things in as things start to reopen.
Anybody else?
I'm not a Buddhist. I'll preface this. If you really want to talk to a Buddhist, you should have Jack Birkenstock from the Bodhana group on here, because he's much more fluent with these concepts than I am. But I do think a lot of it has to do with expectations and attachments. That if we are attached to or expecting coming back to a normalcy, we will be disappointed, and we will once again, it will be a process of grieving and loss, and um, overcoming the denial of that grief and loss process. So I think that we have to not be attached to the concept of normalcy, and we have to be willing to anticipate whatever can happen next, sort of an anticipation without expectation process moving forward. And I think we have to sort of take, I will, like many of us, sort of preach around taking that sort of RPG player approach. Whenever we make plans in an RPG game, you're going to roll some dice, and it might not turn out the best way. And having that sort of knowledge that not every single plan will go off as we expect it to, and how do we sort of plan ahead personally and outwardly to accommodate for when those things need to change. I think that'll be an important part of the process as well, to not be overly attached to that positive outcome, but willing to accept and navigate the situation when it doesn't turn out the way we hope it will be.
Yeah, I think the key point there is very much like not expecting that this will be great. On Monday, well, the world will be back to normal, because it's probably not going to happen, even if that's the day that things open back up. But Hawke and Rachel, like it seemed like Hawke, you had something that you wanted to say.
Rachel, go first, please, and then I'll.
I was just going to say about kind of tapping on what Adam Johns was saying about the routines. And for me, it's about the ambiguity. Even if things start opening up, I'm not like totally convinced I should be going to Michael's and buying crafts I don't need. So I think for me, it's about controlling the things that you can control. It's a serenity prayer, right? Like, go of the things you can't control the things you can. If you have been wearing a mask outside just because things are open, doesn't mean you shouldn't. Maybe stick to that, because like Adam and Adam were saying, things might also start to get pulled back. For me, that's the best way for myself to mitigate the anxiety and the ambiguity about everything that's still in flux for the next 3 years, apparently. So I just want to make a point of that we can't control everything, but we can control some things. So just keep that in mind and control the things that you can control.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it comes that we're basically going to have, a little paradigm shift here as these events cause to happen each time. And one of them, so I'm one of these very high risk populations. I have extensive lung damage. I have to take a lot of immunosuppressants and such for the last 10 years. I'm very vulnerable, but at the same time, I've chosen to still try to see my clients until, but I have for a couple of decades developed a health paradigm where not touching my face and all of that, I did that decades ago. And really 30 years ago, when I was a nurse's aide, rehabilitation therapist, and LPN trainee, I was working on the death floor of a place called Doxy Hatch, where all the terminal patients went, which also included HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, things like that. And level 2 personal protective equipment and such. And really had to develop that habit. I was shocked to see others who didn't outside of, or even in the nursing industry, how few actually followed the training. And then as I got sick and got all this lung damage, and now I'm super vulnerable, is like, well, okay, it's kind of annoying to have to be constantly on the guard for all these things, but the alternative is, a bug takes me out in a day and I'm done. So I made that kind of shift, especially 10 years ago, and now we're seeing kind of the whole culture for the moment is making that shift. We'll have to see if it actually sticks. We don't know if it's going to actually stick long term. We'll see. In Asia, you do see some of that has been around for a lot of years because they've had to deal with this more regularly because of the population density. And Japan and others, they adapted their entire culture around that density. And so they made health paradigm shifts a long time ago that many other countries are. This is a fairly new thing at this level. But how much of it's going to stick, how much of it is viable, I don't know. But I think it is, this whole generation will, at least once you're old enough to appreciate this, is going to have some kind of impact on a health paradigm. It's going to have an ongoing ripple effect. And here's an example. Part of our training with volunteers, we have 20 different levels of game master and trainees and such to do our programs. And level 1 trainees, one of them, they learn to play an electronic role-playing game just so they understand what it is. And one of them is Neverwinter Nights. Well, the introductory adventure for Neverwinter Nights is the plague. And people dying in the streets and all of this. And this last session we did, and someone, hey, somebody trigger warning here? But I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, the game was made in 2002. It's a big part of it. But now people are going to have some reactivity to this that we're going to have to take into account for some of those that have experienced a more traumatic version of this than for some others. Others, they'll be resilient and adaptive and it won't have that. But others, we're going to have to keep that in account, adding to the long list of things we have to watch for. And what you were saying, I mean, that's what we do with all the clients is with reaching out to people, you can't control making others reach out to you. You're the only one you have some control over, and putting yourself in situations where there's a better chance of them reaching out to you, you have control over. And so getting onto sites and groups and chat rooms and what have you, where at least you increase the odds. And most of my clients are last chance, like most of them they've made suicide attempts. They're no longer responding to medication, what have you. So they've kind of come to our program kind of as a last result. This is on the LSC side, because luckily it's worked. But most of them were already incredibly isolated. They really had trouble making friends. They were really uncomfortable reaching out. And the main way was to find common interests, right? Even if it's doing it in the aggregate interactive pattern rather than interactive. You're alongside people doing ceramics or what have you, cooking activities, making soap. Even if you're all online doing it in parallel, having that level of shared experience, you're at least putting yourself there where you have the opportunity where connections might happen. You do have some control over that, even though it can be very difficult to do for some people. And with our programs, we'll bring them in. We might have to start out one-on-one games, and then we'll bring in either a staff member or volunteer to be another player, and then they get used to that process and kind of exposure therapy approach. And then we'll have them watch games, like you're talking about the streaming, and such, and then maybe see about joining a game, maybe, and then slowly add that step by, baby steps, right? What about Bob? And but you do need to put yourself in the opportunity for people to reach out for you, and that's very hard. I've dealt with depression myself, and the last thing you really want to do is deal with people when you're that tired and cognitive slowdown. And it takes a lot of effort. And so, to say this, I know is so much easier than it really is. But when working with clients, this is what helps them turn around, helping give them that little extra nudge of putting them in the situations where they can have these meaningful opportunities. The key difference is between attendance, participation, and engagement. You can have people show up, and that's the first step. At least we got them there. That's something. Now we have potential. When they weren't there, there was nothing we could do. You get them to show up, get their anxiety level down a little bit, make them feel like they're not going to die. Number two is start to get them to engage. So like drum circles and stuff. You don't have to really talk to each other, but you can kind of just try it out, but you don't have to make a personal connection. You can do this in this aggregate way in a drum circle, and yet it's got this communal experience. And then finally, engagement, where you do turn and face each other and you start to make that more of that a deeper human connection. But you wouldn't have had that opportunity if you hadn't at least started with the attendance and then the participation, and then now you can have that engagement. It doesn't have
I feel like that's also the recipe on how to get your extremely Luddite friends to finally join you for a game online too, of just like, hey, it's okay, just hang out and chat.
Yep.
Okay, fine, you've hung out and chat. Okay, now maybe get your microphone working. Okay, hey, look, here's a game. You ready to go?
Incremental exposure therapy.
Mm-hmm. And that's clearly worked with me and my wife, where I started putting on Vampire the Masquerade streams, and just I was watching them, and she was playing Animal Crossing in the room. And eventually she was trying to impress me and score brownie points by being like, oh, is that clan blah, 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 blah. And now I have her playing in a vampire game, and she's doing a great job and having a lot of fun. So it takes a while, but it pays off.
There's a quote from Jacob Moreno, who is the founder of Psychodrama. Like I said, my background's in drama therapy. And he said, there's no such thing as resistance in your clients. It's just they're not warmed up yet. And I've always liked that attitude of seeing not an obstacle, but as a path to walk together.
So we have just kind of a few minutes left. And I think I have discovered the key to figuring out what we're going to cover. And if you look at the agenda, if I put it in the topic groundwork section, then we get through it. And if I put it in the advanced stuff, then we just don't. So I figured out how to cover stuff. But in the few minutes that we have left, is there anything else that anybody specifically wants to discuss? It sounds like Hawke might have a point that he wants to make.
Well, I was just going to say, you were talking about the warming. Another version is you can catch his TEDx talk. Professor Koltz, Koltz, I think he was one of my professors on compassion focused therapy and such. I went through some workshops and such for that, and there's some TEDx talks, and he talks about the proper way to defrost shrimp. Right, you don't just take them out of the freezer and stick them in the microwave or cook them, whatever. Then they'll be all rubbery and it won't work, etc. That you have to take time to go through the defrosting the shrimp process, and if you rush it, you will not get optimal results by far. So we're related to that. But I guess, I'd like to just make sure people are aware of some resources, and please, everybody else, put yours up there. Although we're trying to link to all of yours too. So rpgresearch.com/events, you can sign up for these free games. We're putting them up like tomorrow. We've got a whole bunch of them available for a wide range of different role-playing games for ages all the way from 4 or 5 years old, with parental support because it's remote, but up to seniors and everything in between. Also check out rpgresearch.com/community. I'm scrambling to fill that in. That's where I'm putting all of your guys' stuff. I already had all of yours on the older websites. Just so you know, I've linked to you guys ever since. Anytime I find somebody, I try to help spread the word. But it's a new site, new server, so that page is kind of a mess right now. But if you have programs, if you're doing stuff to help others that they can engage in this way, please email info@rpgresearch.com, info@rpgresearch.com, and we'll get you added to the list. I've been reaching out to everybody for decades, putting them on this list around the world so that people then can find resources in their area. And now with people online, it's that much easier, but still, that's where you can find it, is through /community. And then there's a lot of other info, but that you can find it on the site there. And so please do share to help each other out.
Adam Johns, maybe?
I guess the last thing that I really want to leave people with is a little bit of positivity that a lot of the changes that we're going through now, a lot of the difficulty that we're going through now, have a lot of opportunity to really help us to remind us how much coming together, how much sharing a little bit with each other, and how much having those a game night with friends, having a chance to connect with a family member over the phone, how important those things are for ourselves. And so there is a little bit of for lack of a better term, a silver lining to a lot of the struggles that we're going through now, which is that you're learning how to take care of yourself in a better way, and how to handle some of the pieces to this. Hawke talked a lot about resilience, and a lot of the pieces of resilience are that you've developed a lot of strategies for being able to handle the stressors and the challenges that are coming your way. And so I encourage you to reflect on maybe this is hard, but also take your successes where you get them. Take your moments of like, yeah, but I got up and I took a shower today. I said hi to the mailman. I got outside and went for a short walk. Take those successes and remember that this is a journey, and you're making your way down that journey. Owning your successes is a really, really big and important part of that journey.
I will suggest a book for people to read. I pre-ordered this book before coronavirus even started because it's so relevant to my work and my life. It's called Together by Vivek Murthy, who's the former Surgeon General of the United States. And it's about loneliness. It's about the pervasive loneliness and sort of the epidemic that existed before coronavirus. And I'm only, part of the way through it right now, but it's so far been a pretty valuable resource. So I can tweet about that. I'll send a link to it if you follow at Game to Grow. I can share that. If you are,
what was the author's name again? I can try to print out the link.
I don't remember how to pronounce it. It's Vivek Murthy. I've also seen lots of interviews with him, so I don't remember.
The Healing
exactly.
Power of Human Connection, perhaps.
That sounds right. Yeah. Yes, it's not. I should have had my props here at the table, but I don't have.
Don't worry, I will. I'll pull it up and post a good read link.
That's perfect. You can put that in chat. That would be great. That one I'm really enjoying right now because he brings a lot of the right kind of tone to match the seriousness of it, but also has a generally optimistic attitude about it, which I really appreciate as well. Because we can get really doom and gloom about loneliness. But I think it's really useful to have sort of a scientific approach and a reminder that it is legitimate and that it is not a weakness. When we are sad because we're not feeling connected to people, that's not just a personal issue. That is a systemic issue. It's a challenge that a lot of us experience, and to sort of normalize that it is okay to not be okay, to take this as line. It's a normal thing, and it's an expected thing with the way that a lot of the way that society functions. It is expected to have a hard time with that, and I've personally found that very valuable, both personally and professionally.
Do you have to send a $1 donation now to take this? Now that you've used their,
no, I think they probably appreciate, as all nonprofits do. I'm sure they appreciate the mention. But contact me if you need. I'll send me an invoice. I'll make a small donation to take this. Great tagline. If you are interested in learning more about Game to Grow, we are expanding our services to include more training opportunities. You can learn more about that at gametogrow.org. I suggest you join our newsletter at gametogrow.org/newsletter. And we are also in the midst of having transitioned all 11 social skills groups online for kids and teens mostly. We're also building on that and going to be expanding our online presence, offering services outside just the state of Washington. So if you'd like to learn more about that, please go to gametogrow.org/groups, and you can join and see what kinds of offerings we will begin to offer around the country.
Rachel?
So I just want to make a point. I've been talking a lot to people about COVID-19, and I hear a lot of people say, well, this person has it worse than me. They're sick and I'm not, or I have food in my house and a lot of people don't. And while that's absolutely true, and it's wonderful to show gratefulness for the things that we have, it's also I don't want people to discredit the fact that this is a heightened period of stress for everyone, and it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to feel not great at the moment. It doesn't discredit people who are necessarily having it worse than you are. And if you want to learn more about Take This, you can go to takethis.org. We have a whole series now on COVID-19 on our expert content section about managing a team from home, or how to mitigate fear, self-care when working from home, which is really important. And you can also follow us on Twitter at takethis.org.
Now, am I correct that each of your organizations does have opportunities for individuals who want to get directly involved in helping your mission participate? And all of your websites have ways for folks to contact you about that? Okay, so if anybody is, watching, or if they're lurking in chat as they're slowly warming themselves up to talking with us, check the websites. If you want to kind of help some of these projects reach out to people and connect with people and get through this, your assistance, I'm sure, would be appreciated. But thank you to the four of you in particular. I really appreciate you spending the time with me again, coming out here. I hope that we'll have the opportunity to talk with all of you again. Maybe at some point we will schedule a game night of our own and see what kind of game we can get together. But until then, thank all four of you very much for joining us. Thank you to everybody who joined us to watch. There were a couple people in chat who had some very heavy stuff that they wanted to talk about. So I wanted to thank them for taking the time to share that with us. I was very glad that they were able to come and join us in chat, and that they felt comfortable talking through some of that stuff. And I hope that more people can join us in the future. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, reach out to your friends, and enjoy the time you spend with them.
Yeah. Thank you so much
Bye-bye.
for having us.